Hi everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Mrs Mummypenny Talks with Ridley Writes, and we are now on episode 10. We have officially hit double figures, and this week we are going to be talking to you about how much is enough. So this is an area more, I guess, in my expertise with the personal finance side, because it's how much is enough to save for the rest of your life, for that time when you don't want to be working anymore. I don't want to use the R word because I hate the word retire. I'm trying to just move away from that in all of my writing because as we will go on to discuss, I'm not sure we'll ever really retire, but there we go. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So looking forward to that discussion. But firstly, Beck, how are you? How's your week? Tell us your exciting news, because you have very exciting news from your week.
Yes, I do. Yes. So my week has been heady and full of excitement. Not just for the big one I'm going to talk about, which is I'm co-producing a project called the Milk Monologues with my colleague Natalie Remington through Light and Lark Productions, and we just received just shy of £15,000 worth of Arts Council England funding to be able to run a 2 weeks worth of workshops in which we get women and parents in from predominantly our local community, Bristol and Wiltshire, to share their stories about early infant feeding, which is and it's across the board. So that's breastfeeding, bottle feeding, combi feeding, anything to do with how you manage to maintain the life and survival of that very small, utterly dependent creature when you first become a parent. So that's happening. The 2 weeks is an initial kind of R&D period where we're gathering stories and getting involvement from as many different women and parents from as many different backgrounds as possible, because we really feel that it's such, isn't that the life-changing thing that happens when you become so responsible for the life of another person, and nobody really tells you beforehand how massive feeding your baby is going to be, in terms of, whether you breastfeed or bottle feed, and what the pressures are on you to do one or the other, what the challenges might be, physically and emotionally. All of that kind of stuff really happens behind closed doors and can feel like a really isolating, lonely experience. I don't think there are many mums and parents out there that haven't had that kind of 3 a.m. utterly knackered sensation of just being completely alone and broken, and why won't the baby feed, or why won't the baby stop feeding, or all of those sorts of things. So we want to really open that discussion up by bringing personal stories in and together. At the end of the sort of 2 week process, the idea is that we'll go away and do some further work. We'll stay in communication with our kind of community of parents that have got involved, and look at turning that into some kind of performance that we'll then look to create and put on in 2022, 2023. So yeah, it's really exciting. It's the beginning of something very, very exciting. We have an Instagram account at Milk Monologues, and if anybody listening to this is interested in this project at all, wherever you might be in the country, because although I did say we're doing a lot of stuff in the locality, we're also organising some virtual sessions as well, and it's, I think it's going to be bigger than just this fortnight that we'll be putting on face-to-face workshops in September. So yeah, do get in touch and get involved.
Amazing. And you actually did the application, didn't you, for the money? That's one of your
yes. I'm not going to lie, I think Natalie is a fantastic producer who has put together many Arts Council applications before, and she did do the lion's share of work. I made my contribution, obviously, but I think the lion's share of it definitely went to Natalie on this instance. So yeah,
amazing. Well done. Well,
yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. Lots of work ahead.
So maybe that should be another. I hope we're keeping a list of all these times we say that should be another episode of a podcast talking about feeding your baby. Long time ago for me, not so long ago for you, but I remember those desolate feelings of,
Yeah, absolutely.
why won't this baby feed? Why are my nipples cracked and bleeding, etc., etc. Yeah, difficult. It's difficult. And just pressure and expectation on you. I felt huge pressure that I should be only breastfeeding for as long as I possibly could. But yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's, you know, we're really aware of, and part of the driver behind the project is that there are so many pressures and judgments, and what's really fascinating is from all angles. So, you know, there's the assumption that you know, all the pressure is on for you to breastfeed, and to breastfeed exclusively, and to breastfeed forever, but then there's also equally an awful lot of pressure to not breastfeed, or, you know, oh god, you're still breastfeeding your 3-year-old, like you're a real weirdo. All of that kind of really negative stuff that just doesn't give and then there are so many cultural differences as well, and cultural expectations around infant feeding and what's right and what's not right, and I think, you know, it's just fascinating. There's so much that we'll be able to cover through this project, hopefully. So yeah,
amazing. Well done.
Thank you. How was your week?
Yeah, I've had an amazing week. So I've been away to Norfolk for, it felt like we were away for absolutely ages. It was really weird. I suppose because it's been such a long time since we've been able to go away, and it was gorgeous weather in Norfolk. We went to a little village called Bacton, which it's bizarrely, it's a man-made beach, which I totally didn't realize. So it's a really sort of beautiful golden sands beach, and it was empty. There was no one there. It was incredible. On Monday, because all the kids went back to school on Monday, but my boys didn't go back till Tuesday, so we stayed an extra day, and at some points, I swear, we were the only ones on the beach for like miles and miles. It was amazing. But on the last day, or the last couple of days, which was very random, there was like a jellyfish
oh yeah,
I don't know what you'd call it,
explosion or something. There was just a whole herd of them, whatever you call them.
And they weren't stingers, because you could actually pick them up. They were like and my youngest son, bless him, was trying to like save them all, because they were all getting washed up on the shore, and he was trying to like throw them all back in. But you'd walk along and there'd just be like all of these jellyfish just washed up on the shore. They were like probably like an inch, sort of, they were like a ball shape. I need to look up what they were, but yeah, we were picking them up and they weren't stinging our hands. So maybe baby jellyfish don't sting. But yeah, so we saved as many as we could, but in the end there was too many. And you could obviously swim with them. It didn't matter. But it's really weird. I kept thinking, so the sea in Norfolk's so different to like the sea in Cornwall, to where we're used to. Because like the sea in Cornwall is like crystal clear, like you can see right to the bottom, can't you? And you can also see, because I stress about fish swimming around me, what's going on in Cornwall. But in Norfolk, the sea is the North Sea. It's like sort of like a sandy, muddy mixture of the sea. So the sea's actually like brown, and you can't see what's going on beneath you. So that stressed me out a little bit. So I didn't do that much swimming. Where I'm all right in Cornwall, because it's clear.
A really, really vivid memory, and I think we were both there, but I'll run it past you, see if you remember. I think we were both at St Michael's Mount, peering over the wall around the harbour, and there was loads of jellyfish, big jellyfish, but again it was about kind of the clarity of the water that we could see these big jellyfish. No, you don't remember?
No, but I have seen lots of big jellyfish in Cornwall.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah, really, unless it was like no, you don't get man of war jellyfish in Cornwall, do you? Oh, I don't know.
I'm going to assume not. That feels distinctly much more
Mediterranean
and tropical. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. So anyway, pensions, retirement, words we don't want to mention.
Yeah. So we are going to talk about this massive subject of like, how much is enough? How much do we need to save for when we stop working? When we don't want to be worrying about earning money coming in, it just sort of flows from our savings, our pension pot. And actually, so this all comes from an article that I wrote for PensionBee, which is the company who I, full disclosure, work with, and I put content on their website, and content goes on my website every month. So yeah, very close relationship with them. It's paid, obviously. But yeah, I did this piece of work for them where I spoke to lots of different people in different age brackets as to their views of how much they think is enough and how much they're saving for when they retire. So I spoke to like somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and then I spoke to somebody in their 70s. So it's really interesting to compare what somebody in their 20s now is saying to somebody who's already retired, and how that person in their 70s, how they got to that point, and did they actually have enough. And I must say, the people who I spoke to, they were all quite financially savvy. They all knew how much they were saving, and that was the point of the article. I wanted to speak to people who had a clear sort of goal in mind of how much they wanted to set aside. But it was just really, really interesting how varied the amounts of money, and it's a really it's a very personal article, so it's very impressive all these people gave me all this information. But yeah, I'll pop a link to it in the notes, or you can just go to the PensionBee blog, type in PensionBee blog on Google, and you'll be able to find it on the homepage. But yeah, you had some people aiming to build a pot of like £1 million, and then you had some people aiming to build a pot of like £100,000-200,000. And I think this is the whole point of how much is enough. I mean, it depends on so many factors. It depends on what age you think you will be when you want to be free from working. And it also depends on what your lifestyle is going to be once you hit that financial freedom, for want of a better word, stage of your life. But yeah, it was just really interesting to see the variability of what people are saving up for, and a very personal story as well, because I obviously worked out, I know how much I need to be putting into my pension pot and how much I want to save for the future. But it also made me really aware that it depends on your circumstance as well, because I'm where I am now, I'm a single mum, and I'm just assuming I'm putting money aside for me being single for the rest of my life, but that might not actually be what happens. So the people that are setting aside 700, £1 million, then it's generally like a couple, and yeah, they're working on it together. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept, and I think it's something that it's something that a lot of us sort of brush under the carpet, like, oh, it's pension, it's too far down the line, it's years and years and years away. But in reality, like, it isn't. I mean, we're in our 40s. We can access private pension money from the age of 57. The age changes to 57 in a few years' time. That's not that far in the future. So yeah, I just think it's something that we all need to be aware of. Know how much we've got in our pension pot at the moment, what that money will be worth in the future when we can access it, and is that enough? Because the state's pension, we will talk about some facts and figures, but the state pension isn't enough. Absolutely isn't enough. You will be living in pension poverty if that's all you're relying on. So yeah, that's what I want to.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It was a fascinating article to read, actually. One of the couple of things that really jumped out at me from it, as you say, I think so. There was one of your case studies. Martin, in his 40s, was talking about having a pension and investment pot of 1.3 million. I was like, wow, that's mega. And then
if he wants to, say, retire at the age of 50. Mm-hmm. Then he probably will need a big pension pot like that, because that's, I think, because to get to my numbers of the pot of money I want, there's a calculator on the PensionBee website. I've not worked it out myself. I've just pop numbers into a algorithm and it pops out an answer. But so I'm aiming for 300,000, but I can't retire until I'm 60. And that is reliant on me putting £1,000 a month into my pension.
which was the other thing that I found absolutely sort of stunning. And I mean, I did the calculation on that. So, you know, you're talking about saving £1,000 per month for the next 16 years. And that's, you know, that's a phenomenal amount of money, I think, by anybody's standards. So, yeah, I mean, and definitely, you know, definitely the kind of savings amount that isn't available to a lot, you know, most people in this country, I'd probably say, you know.
No, absolutely.
Which is also interesting, and that sort of sent me off on a bit of a trail about the state pension and the background, and some of the history to pensions, because actually the whole concept of retiring and having a pension is really a very modern one. It doesn't really kick in, the idea of retirement doesn't really kick in until kind of post the Industrial Revolution. So, you know, pensions and retirement is heavily bound up with two things really. One is life expectancy, which of course continues to rise. I don't think it's plateaued yet, but I think it must be getting close. But and then also it's tied up with capitalism, consumerism, a very different way of working to how we did in kind of pre-industrial times. So, you know, those are two very significant factors that have changed things. But I mean, as you say, if we start out with where we are now, so the state pension is currently, according to your facts and figures, I must cite my source, £179.60 per week, which, as you say, I think most people would find it, you know, pretty challenging to live on that much money. I think one of the things I didn't check into is sort of, you know, there are other supports out there, I suppose, aren't there, in terms of sheltered housing and accommodation for retired people, that for pensioners and retired people, that is at a subsidized amount, so you're not having to pay kind of crazy rents and things. But anyway, totally separate things. And also in terms of stats, I found out that over 2/3 of pensioners living in poverty are women, and that's from Unison, who are doing a big piece of work right now to try and close the gender pension gap as well, which is really interesting. So yeah, but I mean, actually, you know, prior to the 18th century, we didn't really think about retirement and pensions, and actually, in the 19th century, interestingly, 1883, it was German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, in a maneuver against the Marxists that were becoming increasingly popular in Germany, made all over 65s retire and gave them a pension. And that was sort of a means of getting a popular vote back from them, or popularity back for them.
Clever.
And then in 1875, American Express was the first company in America to offer a private pension. Hadn't been done by anybody else, any company prior to that. And actually, retirement in the US was something that they started to think about post the Industrial Revolution. And it was exacerbated by the Great Depression, where old people being employed was actually causing unemployment of young people. And so retiring them off and having them pensioned was a really good thing to do, because it freed up some more space in the workforce. And many old people really struggled to adjust to this idea of being retired. It wasn't anything that they particularly wanted to do, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
In this country, it was 1908 when we had the first Old Age Pensions Act, and this coverage was very limited. It was it was limited for financial and moral reasons to the undeserved poor. So the other thing that's fascinating is there's this real moral sense that you're morally degenerate if you're in poverty. So there's, you know, some really kind of negative assumptions about the fact that it's your fault that you don't have money, that tie into how money is considered, and how pensions are considered. But anyway, so those that don't deserve to be poor, which tend to be widows, orphans, and some of the people in old age. But that first act in 1908, actually, the level was so low, it works out as 25p. 25, I want to say 25 pence a week, but that still feels like quite a lot. But anyway, whatever it was really low, and it was so low that if you were able to work, it would never have tempted you into taking the pension. And it wasn't until 1942 that the Beveridge Report came out and talked about social insurance and allied services. So pensions in this country and retirement is related to the welfare state and the concept of it. And it's supposed to be a safety net against old age deprivation. And it was only 1946 the National Insurance Act introduced pensions. Then in the 1980s, neoliberal policy and thought challenged whether government should provide pensions above a minimum, and promoted the role of individual responsibility in markets in providing for individual needs. Yeah, it's fascinating. So, you know, that's where very much it's the issues are very much the same around pensions since it's been introduced as a government policy, that the idea of a pension is it should encourage and reward thrift, that it has to be financially viable, and it has to eradicate poverty. So any kind of state pension is working on some very specific concepts here. So that's very different to the idea of how much is enough to keep you comfortable. So there isn't a sense of pensions, and certainly not state pensions, being there to provide for you comfortably in old age. There was something I stumbled across that I hadn't thought about. There's something called active aging policy that's being talked about in this country, which is once you introduce the concept of old age and old age pensions and retirements, you categorize and in some senses ostracize a group of people out of society. And so this idea of active aging is to change and to challenge how we see ourselves as older people and as an economic and social resource, and therefore reduce the barriers for older people participating in society, which I think is really interesting as well. So yeah, lots of fascinating kind of history there, and yeah, so I thought I'd share that with you.
But I think sorry, I do have a cough. I don't have COVID. I do have a cough though. I think the really important thing in younger life to dwell on, to have to almost come up with a goal is, what kind of lifestyle do you want to be leading when you no longer work? So if you want to, and bear in mind that we are living a lot longer. So on average, you know, women last till they're 85. I think men last till they're 84, might be 86, around that sort of age. So we're only, like at 44, we're only halfway through our lives pretty much. Mm-hmm. And so let's say you would like to stop working at the age of 60, 65. What do you want to be doing for those years beyond then? It is likely that they will still be active years because we are getting healthier, you know, being able to do a lot more for longer. So do you want to be doing things like traveling and, you know, doing wonderful stuff with your family, and which all costs money? And if you don't have much of a private pension set aside, I should backtrack, and we should talk a little bit about state pension versus private pension as well. But if you're just relying on that 180 quid a week, you are not going to be able to do that kind of stuff. So beyond the age of when you stop working, or if you can even stop working, then life is potentially going to be quite difficult. And so it's something you really have to prepare for in the future. That I absolutely know that once I hit this point of, you know, no children, all that kind of responsibility, I want to be gallivanting around the world and doing all that traveling stuff that I wasn't able to afford in my younger years and wasn't able to do with the, you know, the child rearing years. So I want to have enough money to do that. But so yeah, just a bit of basics about pension. So yeah, you have your state pension, which at the moment you can access at the age of 67, but because the population is getting older and government coffers are always being monitored, that age is likely to increase over the next, well, it will carry on increasing infinitely, I suppose, to a plateau. But and how you get that state pension is via national insurance contributions. I think that your speaker has done that thing, so switch it off and on again. So yes, you need 35 years worth of national insurance contributions to get your full state pension. And we've both, I mean, I always know what mine is, but we've both gone to the government website to check our national insurance. And I think I've got 28 years worth of national insurance contributions, which feels very random because I'm not sure I've worked for 20. No, it can't be 20. Yeah, 28 every year since I was 16. I have national insurance contributions for. Yours was a few years less, which again we can't really work out. But
no, so I mean, 25 years worth of fully paid, and then 3 years of not fully paid, and those 3 years happened to be 3 years when I was at university, where, honest to God, I worked 2 to 4 jobs, like, you know, at a time during university. So I don't know how much more work I was expected to do at those periods of time. But anyway, there we go. So
we're both pretty close to getting that 35 years worth of national insurance contributions. So we'll be fine. And then you've got private pensions, where that varies if you're employed or if you're self-employed. So if you are employed, you have to actually opt out of these pension schemes now, and so you're actively encouraged not to do so, because when you put money into, we've both been employed in our lives, you contribute money into your private pension at work, your employer will also contribute a chunk of money into your pension as well. And sometimes it's really generous. Like, I've been working for companies where I've put in 4% and my company's put in 4% as well. Plus you get the tax benefits of those pension contributions as well, where the tax, you in effect put money into your pension before you are taxed. So you've got this double whammy when you're employed. So it's free money is being chucked at you. So please don't opt out of an employed pension. And then when you're self-employed, it's very different. One of probably the biggest disadvantage of being self-employed is, you've got nobody putting money into a pension for you. But there are nice tax benefits of putting money into a pension when you're self-employed. You get if you're a sole trader, sorry, couldn't think of the word. If you're a sole trader, the government will give you the tax credits back. I'm a limited company, and it's a before tax expense for me. So I try to chuck as much through my business into my pension that way, and it saves me 19% tax. So it's almost, I feel it's worth doing to save me on the tax, but it is literally like free money is being given to you. It's the best savings pot you're going to be able to put your money into because of that money you're getting back from the government. But equally, I didn't start worrying about it until turning 40, really. So I led a bit of a sort of ignorant life in my 20s and 30s that, it's just too far in the future to worry about. So, and I did have some contributions from an employer.
Pretty normal though, right? I mean,
you
know, your case study, what was it Matt or Mark?
Jordan in his 20s.
Jordan in his 20s. Low target, because at the moment his decision was, between saving for pensions or saving to help him get on the property ladder, and his view was that by getting on the property ladder, he would he'd then have that asset to help him in older age. And you can kind of see, if you're going to have a savings. And again, these are all people that are still thinking in terms of money decisions. They're very money minded, I think, in the decisions they're making. You can see that you probably can't divide that couple of quid so many different ways. You have to make a decision, don't you?
No, very much so. But that's an interesting interesting concept about putting money into property, relying on money and property rather than, so if we look at my sister, for an example, my sister, she's soon to reach retirement age. She's in the WASPy years, which is the women who thought they were going to be retiring at the age of, I'm going to get it wrong, like the age of 60, and the government changed the rules, so they actually couldn't retire till they were 65. Yeah, because my sister's, she's 21 years older than me. She's 65. I don't think she can quite access her pension yet, but she's very close to it. But all of her money is tied up in her property. So she's now like mid-60s, and she's in this sort of quandary of I've got all this money tied in my property, but I don't want to move house because I've lived here for ages, and it's got a gorgeous garden and it's got everything she needs. So she doesn't want to downsize. So literally she can't access that money in her property. So it's a tricky one to always rely on money sat in your property. And likewise, the other thing I was going to mention with property is many people now have got really long mortgages to make our mortgages affordable. So I'm a classic example. I've got 26 years left on my mortgage. So that takes me to the age of 70. Now, oh my gosh, there's no way I want to be still paying £1,000 a month, mortgage by the time I'm 70. So I'm going to have to move to and downsize to a cheaper property to sort of release that extra money to get to a point of when I'm 60, my goal age of when I don't want to be working anymore. I don't want to have a mortgage when I'm 60. So that's another pressure, is I've got all this money I've got to be chucking into my pension. But I need to also move house as well to get rid of my mortgage. It's but there will be so many people who are reaching retirement age who still have payments left on their mortgage or rent to pay. I just think it's a never ending, and it just feels like it's getting worse. Where particularly where you look at the case study of the person I spoke to in their 70s, like they were able to buy property when it was really, really cheap, and they owned that property not too far down the line. They were then able to buy more sort of investment properties, and then suddenly by the time they're in their 50s, they've got like 4 or 5 properties. They've also got a business that they owned, and they've now got a very sort of rosy position. But I think that is a very fair point that Martin, I think one of the guys in the 40s, made, that a lot of people who are comfortable in their later years, they have money coming from various different sources.
Yes. There was a lot of mention of different income streams as well, wasn't there? Not just necessarily having a pension pot. But I think I think one of the things you just said there that's really interesting is, of course, if you look at the model that Jordan's looking at, it is Jill, the lady in her 70s who actually retired in 2003. So she retired in her 50s.
Yeah.
Because of the money she'd made through property. So it's fascinating, because I think you're right. That's not going to be a sustainable model. I mean, or a sustainable method necessarily for ensuring that you've got money in later life. What's also really fascinating is that part of the property hike in terms of cost of property and cost of rent is because so many people bought so many properties and have made the market what it is today. That between that and regulations being restrictions being reduced on mortgages and lending back in the late 90s and early noughties, those two things have created this system where house prices are basically unaffordable. Rent is through the roof. I feel when I look at all of this, and even the concept, which is why I was interested in looking into the history of it a little bit, I wonder whether this is a period of time where home ownership and the concept of retirement and having a pension and what have you, this is probably the golden age of it right now, that it will change, and it will change in all sorts of ways. I mean, another one of the stats that I got from the Office of National Statistics was in the UK, it's estimated population aged over 65 will grow twice as fast as the working population, accounting for 24% of all population in the UK by 2037. So that's a quarter of the population over 65, effectively, in what we classify as age of retirement. And and if you also start to look at other transformations that are happening in society, where we have increased automation and the rise of the robots, and how many of the jobs that are done will be done by the workforce as stands. I really think we are living in very in fascinating times, in terms of, I think life will look very different by 2037, which isn't that far away.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, to see how much things will change. But also, I think, so that the average age people get to now, 85, 86, what is that going to change to in 15, 20 years time? Because it could easily go up to sort of 95, 100, and
and I think then there are even more, there are many really other issues, aren't there, in terms of how long are we healthy and capable and active, when is it,
and how long are we dependent?
Yeah, I mean, stuff that you and I don't even have to sort of double think about or worry about. But I have, I have family and friends that, family by marriage and friends that have grandparents in care homes, needing quite a lot of intensive care, and even parents, that have had issues like Alzheimer's and stuff, that have required a lot of care that's incredibly expensive as well. So I think that's another thing that starts to come in with the longer you live, the higher your chances are of not being and that's an interesting thing, isn't it, to sort of say, oh yeah, well, when I retire I want to do all these great exciting things. Well, when you retire you might not be able to do all those great exciting things. From a personal point of view, I don't expect to retire. I genuinely don't expect to retire, and I don't really have any desire to retire. I would rather, as long as I can, I want to be able to work. That's central to how I feel about things.
But I think I'm the same as you, but I think that's because we are now doing jobs that bring us joy and make us happy. We wake up every day, and you remember, no, I'm sure it was the same for you as for me, but the dread on a Sunday night of, what was going to happen this week at work, with that horrendous commute to get into work, and then all the stress when I was at work. I just, if I was doing that now, I got out of it as soon as I could. So I just think it's, I can absolutely, as long as we continue to evolve our businesses, to what the population needs, we can still be, both of us, doing our business till the day we die, because it's not based on physicality, is it? It's based on, it works well in the online world at a computer. But I just want to be in the position where I don't have to worry about the money coming in from everywhere. At the moment, and obviously I'm very fixated with numbers anyway, but I have a certain number that I have to hit each month to pay the bills, to put my £1,000 a month into my bloody pension, and all the rest of it, to set some money aside for holidays. I just want to be in that position where I don't have to worry about creating that income each month. Just having that, because it just feels like, and it's because of my mindset, and because I write about money for a living, but I've just always got money on my mind. I always have to create this X £1,000 each month. So yeah, it's sort of getting that, it's trying to remove that mental thing from my head. But
what I mean, maybe it's worth doing a bit of a roundup here on what what are the practical steps that people can take or should be take? What should people, women perhaps in particular, be thinking about when they think about their pensions and when they're thinking about planning for the future?
So I think it's worth getting, and this is going to take a little bit of time, like an hour, a couple of hours, to pull out the paperwork and actually work out how much you've got in your pension pots. Because if you've worked for companies, and there's some really shocking facts that based on Life Now and chopping and changing between companies, an average person by the time they reach retirement age would have worked for like 15 companies. So you can, I mean, this is a few years down the line for us, but you could potentially have money dotted around in lots and lots of pots. So get a handle on what you've got in those pots. It makes sense for some people, not for everybody, to consolidate that all in the same pot, which is something that PensionBee do. Full disclaimer, they pay me, blah, 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 blah. They don't pay back, but they pay me. But that's certainly what I've done with all my pension pots, all in the same place. So I know exactly what's in there, but and I'll do full disclosure with my numbers as well. So I know that I've got 73 grand sat in my pension pot at the moment. That's the calculators on the PensionBee website also tell me that will be worth about £110,000 at my intended retirement age. So, you know, money grows over time because it's invested in funds and companies. So if I put nothing more into my pension from this day onwards, I'm going to have £100,000 and a bit, which in my view, based on the lifestyle I want to lead and when I retire, isn't enough. So yeah, just get a handle on what money you've got, and then you'll be able to work out, based on all these online tools, what that will be worth down the line. And just have that thought about when you want to retire. And the other thing I want to point out for women is this is often the case, and it's not right, but it's often the case that in a partnership, the man the person who hasn't taken on the childcare responsibilities has a much bigger pension pot, particularly if you've both been employed, and the woman doesn't, because she's taken time off for caring for her children or caring for older parents or whatever, or going to part-time working.
Yeah.
And the difference in the pension pot is huge. Like by the time people actually retire, 40%, it's huge. So but that then causes problems if a marriage then breaks up. Bear in mind, 42% of marriages end up in divorce, and it can be a bit of a battle over the pension pots, which just don't forget about those kind of things. So once you're figuring out how much you've got in your pension, find out how much your partner has got in their pension as well. And just information is power. Know what that information is, and then have a think about how much you want for the future and what steps you can put in place to get to a more suitable place, or you might be in the right place. But yeah, it's just know what's going on. Don't bury it under the carpet. Like,
and is there, in your mind, is there like a hierarchy then? You know, so first thing, get your finances in order, know what your debts are, clear your debts. You know, what would you say to Jordan right now if you were not that he's asking, but if he was asking for advice? Would you say that his approach of focusing what he does with his money right now on saving for a house ideally is the best way of him spending his time and money, or do you think there's a different way that might be sort of more beneficial for how he sorts his finances out?
Well, my biggest regret from my 20s is that I didn't put anything into my pension. Yeah. And so it's small amounts, right? So if I'd put in £50 a month into my pension in my 20s, bear in mind that I didn't have kids, and sort of lifestyle expenses were probably, I was spending less in my 20s. If I'd just put in 50 quid a month, my employer would have put in 50 quid a month, because it was, you've then got another 40-50 years until you're accessing that money when you retire. The compound interest that gets added on, it's like that money you put in at a young age is just worth so much more many years down the line. So I think it's just, even if it's just a little bit, like just put a little bit into your pension. And it's almost, what I wish I'd done was, from my very first job, my very, very first, full-time job when I was 22 after university, that money just went out of my salary into my pension, and it just happened, and you get used to it. Unfortunately, I had like 8 years or whatever where I didn't make those contributions, and I got used to it. So then suddenly it was like, oh, I've got to put £100 a month from my salary into my pension when I was like 32 or whatever. It was more of a shock, but just get used to it from a younger age. Because I think preparing for your future, it does need to be balanced. Like, well, maybe you want to buy a property, but put money into pension, put money into investments, and have sort of money in lots of different diversified pots. That would be what I would say. So I have actually said to Jordan, you really need to just put a little bit into your pension, just a little bit, because he's self-employed like you and I.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if this is anything that either of us are qualified to speak on. But what about people that, are low income, low earners, zero contract? I don't know. Like, is there anything they can do? Is there anything they ought to be kind of thinking about? Do they need to be pestering their employer to do something different? I don't know. I don't know what any of the rules and regs are around that.
Well,
do employers still have to make a pension contribution with those 0 hours contracts, for argument's sake? Is there an issue there? I don't know.
I don't know about 0 hours contracts. That's getting far too complicated. But the employ at a certain earning level, employers will automatically opt you into a scheme, and it won't be much of a contribution coming out of your salary. And you also have to think, well, if I'm putting in that 4%, the employer's putting in 2% plus getting the tax back. It's just that little bit of putting away. I recognise it's hard, but I don't know, propel yourself forward to having bugger all money when you're 67, in your late 60s, and just putting a little bit aside when you're younger is almost worth it. It's a difficult, because I remember being in my 20s just thinking, oh, why bother? It's so far down the line. But it's worth it. So everybody go and figure out your pensions.
And is there any positive there in that, actually, yes, ideal world, put money in your pension as early as possible. I think that point that you made, that the pounds you saved today, the pounds you save the younger you are, will be worth that much more than the pounds you save in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. But actually, perhaps there is also something there in taking a bit of faith from the fact that you can catch, you can catch this up when in your 30s and 40s. It'll never be as easy, but there is time and space. So I think another thing to sort of chuck out there is that there's an awful lot of anxiety, mental anxiety around finances, isn't there? And I think that's heightened. I remember in my 20s being enormously kind of anxious about money, and actually, that there's an element of, kind of, as you always talk about, get your budget in order for now, focus on what you need to focus on for right now, and yes, always have in mind these other things and the importance of planning ahead and what have you. But actually, some of the sort of most calming, almost some of the best self-care you can do, I think you've talked about that historically, is that financial planning and financial well-being, looking after yourself, understanding where you are financially, can be some of the best sort of form of self-care that you can do for yourself at any age, really.
And also, I think it's worthwhile talking about that life is about balance. So there's about living life for the moment, and there's sort of putting money aside for the future. And some people like save and save and save so much money for their future, and then live a relatively restrictive, frugal life. Now, horses for courses, do what you want. But I just think, like, life is for living, as we know, with parents who died younger, and for all we know, the same could happen to us. So it's like, make the most of life now, and do spend some money on things that you really enjoy and experiences you want to relish, because yeah, like in your 20s and 30s, it's your prime time of your life, isn't it, to enjoy some of those, particularly before children, to enjoy some of those fun things. So yeah, like I'm annoyed at myself that I didn't put money into my pension in my 20s, just because it would have been worth a lot now, and there wouldn't be so much pressure. Like, my pension pot would have been worth a lot more than 70 grand by now, put it that way. But then I did have a really nice time in my 20s.
Life can only ever be lived now, right? So
Yeah,
balancing those two things out.
yeah. So yeah, on that note, we've just written off putting money into a pension. Spend it all now. No, balance.
Balance. It's all about balance.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay,
All right. Well, I think this is probably a good place to end. So thank you very much for listening. You have been listening to Mrs Mummypenny Talks with Ridley Writes. You've also been listening to a yipping dog who is dreaming by my feet. I apologise if you heard that earlier. And the podcast music is written, composed and performed by Daniel Greensmith. The podcast and YouTube video is produced by Lynn Beattie, and we are your hosts, Rebecca Megson Smith and Lynn Beattie. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back in your headphones in a week's time. Take care and have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.